All right, guys, let's get into it. Again, very quick one for you today because I just don't want to. I don't want to overcomplicate it. It just doesn't need to be complicated. It's very simple. There's only two things that separate the boys from the men, that turn a male into a man. And very simply put, it's character and it's competence. That's it. It's your character and it's your competence. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one." And while I can certainly understand the sentiment, because a lot of the times we get wrapped up and consumed with conversations and getting into the nuance and all these other little things, and sometimes it doesn't really matter all that much. But I do think that this is worthy of at least discussing and talking about. And I think it's important to talk about, even in the light of what Marcus Aurelius said about waste no more time arguing about what a man should be. And here's why I wanted to bring this to your attention. Because I want you to understand that I don't for 1 second believe that the way I go about being a man, the way I perform my duties, what specifically my duties are, the way I show up, is what it means to be a man. It's not. At the end of the day, it means a protector, a provider, and a presider. Now, there's an infinite number of combinations and ways to go about doing that and to step into those roles, and that's the point that I'm making with you here. It's not about how you specifically show up. It's not about necessarily your tone of voice or the way that you look or the way that your voice sounds or what you do for work. Those aren't the things that matter, guys, and that's what we need to understand. We get so consumed in what exactly a man does, but I think we ought to take a step back and look at it from a 30,000-foot view, because if we look at it from that perspective, then we can realize that the way we go about performing our duties and our roles and our functions in our families, our businesses, our societies, our communities, we'll begin to see that we can do this and fulfill these obligations in an infinite number of ways. So if we look at it at its foundational level, like its root level, strip everything else away and all the noise and all the nonsense and all the things that I've said in the past and all the things that you've heard from other podcasts and there's other people, after all of that is stripped away, it's your character and it's your competence. That's it. It's what you produce. Now, a lot of guys will talk about fluffy, magical unicorns and these utopian societies and how we just want to be good people. And while your motives are wonderful, your intentions may be noble, the way you feel and what's in your heart might be good and fine and well, but if you're not producing, if you're not bringing something to the table, then what good is it in having you around? Now, about this time, I know everybody's going to say, "Oh, well, Ryan, how could you say that? You're saying some people are worth more than others." I'm not talking about your inherent worth as a human being. All right, we all have inherent worth because we are human beings. And a lot of us have stored up or potential worth. That's not what I'm referring to, because I believe all of us do have inherent worth as human beings. But I will tell you, and we know this, just for example, in the corporate world, that some men are more valuable than others in certain aspects. For example, if you have an employee who is generating $100,000 in revenue for an organization, then that employee is worth this much. If you have another employee within that same organization and that employee is generating $1 million of revenue, then obviously that employee is worth more in this context to the employer than the one who is producing $100,000 of income. We know this. This is common sense. This doesn't need to be argued about. And the only reason it would be argued about is because people are conflating my language or taking what I'm saying out of context and saying I'm talking about human worth. No, I'm talking about, in this context, your worth to an organization. We could talk about it in the same context when it comes to being a family man, being a father, being a husband. If you are a husband and you're out drinking and you're out running around with other women and you aren't occupied with your family, you're more occupied with business and everything else that's going on, you are less valuable as a husband and a father than the man who's at home when he says he's going to be home. He's deeply connected with his children. He's intimately familiar with his wife. He's romantic with her. He provides the necessary income, but he provides other things as well, like love and discipline and guidance and structure and presence. Then obviously, objectively, when we're looking at this, that type of man is more valuable as a resource, as a father, as a husband, as a man, than the individual who's not treating his duties the way that he should and taking them lightly and not producing as much as he could. So we've got to understand there's a distinction between your inherent worth as a human being and your worth as fill in the blank, a father, a husband, an employee, an executive, a business owner, a coach, a mentor, a brother, whatever. And your job, again, after everything else is stripped away, forget about all the titles and the roles and the occupations, your job is to not think well about things, not to have good intentions, not to want to do the right thing. It's to produce. And that is, at its foundational level, what character is about. Character is about honor. It's about integrity. It's about doing well. It's about the service of others. And it's about a virtuous life. But it's also about honoring your word, mirroring your actions and therefore your results with the way that you think about life and yourself, and also the way that you talk about yourself and life and the way that this world works. And if you can't find a way to mirror the two, then you are being less manly. And I know that that is not a popular thing to say in the culture that we've created, where everybody's the same and we don't want to leave anybody out and we want to make people feel comfortable, and heaven forbid somebody feel ostracized or put down or let down. But you know what? That's reality. And I'm not telling you that I am the epitome of masculinity. I'm not telling you I have this figured out much more than you. These are just things that I've recognized. And usually when I'm talking to you, I'm more talking to myself. Like, these are the reminders and the lessons I need as well. I need to understand that I need to find a way to more accurately mirror what it is I'm doing with the way that I see the world and the words that I'm using and the thoughts that are bouncing around in my brain. And the larger that gap, I've referred to it in the past as an integrity gap, the larger that gap, the more like a boy that you're behaving. Right? Because you might be, and Kip and I talked about this in this week's Ask Me Anything, the difference between motivation and discipline. You might be motivated, you might be hopped up and hyped up because you just got back from a conference or a seminar or a course, or listening to somebody and you think, okay, well, I'm going to do it this time. And then you don't go out and produce because you let the emotion run its course and you didn't have the discipline in place and you didn't have the processes to make sure that this thing got taken care of. All right, well, congratulations, you felt good, you had a desire to do something, but you didn't actually do it. And so you're not behaving as manly as somebody who can get past their emotion or work past their emotion or drive along that course of action after the emotion and the excitement has long gone. And that's the difference. That's what character means. It means to align your thoughts and your ideas with your actions. And I would say that in addition to that, we would assume, and I hope that you know that I'm talking about virtuous living as well, being a man of honor and integrity and character and love and service. But ultimately, you've got to have the character to back it up. And we all fall short, guys. We all fall short from time to time. But the sooner you can get back on track, the sooner you can reconcile, the sooner you can acknowledge that you messed up along the path, and that you don't get down about it, you don't beat yourself up, you don't wallow in your own self-pity, you don't use it as a habitual practice, that you just recognize, you know what, I messed up, I screwed up, I missed my workout, or I didn't show up to time, or I missed the deadline on the project, or I didn't honor my wife the way I should have, or my children the way I should have, and you correct the behavior. That's the difference. Correct the behavior as quickly as possible, make amends to the degree that you can, and then rectify it by doing different things, by becoming a man of character. Now, the second component of this is competence. And notice I didn't say you have to be an athlete. I didn't say you had to be a warrior. I didn't say you had to be the alpha CEO. Now, you could be those things, but that's not what defines you. You could be an artist. You could be a musician. You could be a janitor. You could be a school teacher or a nurse or whatever. Fill in the blank. It really doesn't matter. But you've got to be competent. Or you've got to be proficient in the thing that you want to excel at so that what? You can produce. Again, being a man is about being in service and it's about producing. We talk about protect, provide, and preside. All those elements have an underlying element of service and of production. And your level of competence is what's going to determine your results that you're producing. If you're incompetent and you're ignorant and you don't know what you're doing and you aren't trying to figure that stuff out and you aren't putting new information into your brain and you aren't developing and working on a skill set and you aren't practicing and you aren't drilling with the things that you need to be doing, then you're not going to be nearly as competent as the individual who was. And it shouldn't be a surprise to you, and you shouldn't be outraged, frankly, that you didn't produce the results, the same results that this guy next to you might have when he put forth the effort and the work. This is what we call the meritocracy. You are rewarded handsomely for your merits, for the work that you do, for the effort that you put in, for the training that you have, for the results that you produce. So again, as much as we live in this world that wants to reward everybody for just merely showing up, and we have clever little phrases like showing up is half the battle. No, it isn't. I mean, you got in the stadium. Like, congratulations, you showed up. That doesn't mean anything. And we say that so that we can reward mediocrity. We can reward doing the bare minimum. I'm not interested in that. You're not interested in that. And it isn't what men do. Boys do that. Even my own boys. You know, they show up and I tell them to do their chores and they do, just the bare minimum to get by, just to say, I did it, Dad, and get to check their thing off the list. But hey, if I came and checked it, we all know what that looks like because I used to do that too when I was a child. I even do that now when I'm behaving like a child. So I'm not above it. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that I acknowledge it, that I recognize it, that I understand that that is not manly behavior. It is boy-like behavior. And we as men, or those who have a desire to become men, understand that this is how we fall short, and here's how we rectify it, and here's how we get better, and here's how we improve, and here's how we become competent in a skill set, in a trade, in a hobby, in an activity, so that we can produce and be more effective for ourselves and for the people that we have an obligation to. It could be your children or your wife. It could be your employees. It could be the little boys and girls that you coach on that baseball or that soccer team. You have an obligation and responsibility for those individuals. So you need to be a man of character and you need to be a man of competence. And if you aren't taking the time to develop the skills, to learn what you need, to research, to apply the information, then you're falling short. And I know that doesn't sit well with everybody. But you know what? That is the truth that we all need to hear from time to time, is that you aren't as adequate as you could be. But you can get there. I'm not saying that you're not capable of doing it. I'm saying that you and I both, we may not be where we need to be right now. But we can get there. But we need to acknowledge that there's a gap, there's a bridge between where we are right now and where we want to go. And it isn't up to anybody else to build that bridge for us. And it isn't up to anybody else to throttle back their own performance so that we feel better about where we're at. I spend time with high-performing individuals. I have them on this podcast. I consult with them. Some of these men are my coaches and my mentors, and some of them are my friends. And they are high-performing. They are high-drive, high-speed, red, dominant personalities. And I can guarantee you, I can assure you, that not a single one of them is willing to slow down so that I can catch up. Now, they're willing to give me the information I need. They're willing to extend a hand. But they're not going to slow down their own results just so I can feel good about my inadequacy. It's not how this works. That is not the conduct of men. Men want to perform. They want to excel. They want to thrive. They want to do it on, I shouldn't say on their own, but they want to do it based on their own merit. They don't want to be handed things. And there's a difference between help and a handout. A hand up and a hand out. Those are different. right? It's okay to accept help. In fact, it's encouraged. You should have a mentor or a coach or multiple mentors and coaches who are helping you along the path. But you've got to develop these abilities to become a man of character, aligning your actions with your words and your thoughts, and a man of competence. Now, interestingly enough, and then we'll wrap things up for today because I told you this is going to be a short one, is one of the things that I hear from a lot of men is questions centered around confidence. How do I build confidence? How do I build confidence with women? How do I build confidence enough to ask for promotion? How do I build confidence with just me as a human being? Guys, you don't get that. Okay, it isn't a right. Confidence isn't a right. It's a privilege. It's a blessing. It's something that you earn. It's a reward or a benefit of the work that you do. So if you've ever caught yourself wondering how you can develop more confidence, and you should all want to do that because the confident individuals produce the results, but it's not because they're confident. And that's where guys get messed up. See, we look at guys who we assume are confident and we think, well, that guy's getting the results because he's confident. No, it goes deeper than that. This is how you build confidence and the results that stem from it. Character and competence. That's it. This is the equation. If you want to develop, for example, more confidence with women, then you need to develop a heightened sense of character, aligning your actions with your words. And by the way, women will acknowledge that. They'll recognize that. They'll see that without you having to say a word. They can see it in you. Just the way your boss can see it, or your supervisor, or your wife, or your children, or whoever else you're trying to lead. They know when you're bullshitting them. And they know when you're a man of character. And men of character are more attractive to women, to potential employers, you name it. Okay? So you've got to develop that level in order to develop that level of confidence, you have to have the character and you have to have the competence. You have to have the skill set to match it. Because if you don't know what you're doing, people will acknowledge that as well. They'll see that, they'll recognize that, and they will voluntarily decide not to follow you because you aren't somebody worth following. Again, I know there's going to be people coming out, oh, Ryan, how could you say that? You're not worth following? That's right. Sometimes you're not worth following. There have been times in my life where I have not been worth following. There have been times in my life where I've been extremely overweight. I was a failure in my marriage. I was unsuccessful in business attempts. And what right did I have to believe that people should follow me? Unless they were trying to produce those results for themselves, which I don't think many people are. Most people are trying to produce better results. And in order for them to follow you, and it has to be voluntary, because if it isn't, it's tyranny or dictatorship. In order for them to follow you, you have to be somebody worth following, which means you have the competence which will produce the results that that individual is after. All right, so a short one for you today, but think on that. Stew on that. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree, maybe you find yourself somewhere in the middle. I'd love to continue to have this conversation. Connect with me on the socials. Instagram is probably best, at Ryan Mickler. Let me know what you think. Again, I believe that the only two things, if you strip everything else away that it means to be a man, and the two characteristics that we need to be men, is, again, character and competence. And that will foster confidence, that will foster the results that we're after, and that will help us lead more effective lives, more profitable, more fulfilling, more satisfied, more whatever. Fill in the blank with whatever it is you're after. You will get that through your character and your competence. So get out there, get working on it. We'll be back next week for another podcast. I've got some very, very interesting ones lined up for you. I've got one I'm working on right now that I really, really want to tell you who it is, but I'm not going to, and I can't yet. But I'm working on it, and we will continue to work on these, and I will let you know. Make sure you subscribe, leave a rating and review so you never miss a podcast. Share this with a friend, a colleague, a brother, a mentor, a father, whoever, who needs to hear this message of reclaiming and restoring masculinity, who needs to hear the message of character and competence, so that we can all go out and we can thrive in the way that is meaningful for us. All right, guys, I'll be back next week. Until then, go out there, take action, become the man you are meant to be.